We all know that the start to a good meal is a good recipe. And then once you get that good recipe, being able to follow that recipe so that it turns out the product that you were expecting to get. The same exact same thing happens to us with project management. We need to be able to, for each and every project that we're associated with, we need to come up with a recipe of all of the things that need to happen, when they need to happen, and all to the extent that things have to happen in order for us to get to the quality product we want at the end. That's built around a work breakdown structure. So let's get in and start talking a little bit about work breakdown structures in here and how this affects us. First of all, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. Second, as long as this information is retained in someone's head, it's vulnerable for loss. And this takes us back to this idea of a recipe from before. I know some people that can absolutely go through and make something from scratch without a recipe. However, if I was ever to try to go through and make exactly what they made, I would never be able to do it because I don't have the recipe for success. That means that we need in project management to come up with these recipes. We need to come up with work breakdown structures that provides us a system for capturing all of the information that we need about a project so that we can do it to make sure that we're not missing anything, or so that we can turn it over to somebody else and they can finish cooking whatever we're cooking and we get to the same product. So let's look at a work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is one of those key deliverables for every project that takes and organizes everything into manageable tasks. If we take an example of a house, this work breakdown structure is not just to state we're going to construct a house. Instead, we have other things. We have the foundation of the house that needs to be worked on. We have the internal parts of the house. We have the external parts of the house. So as we go through and we start looking at a work breakdown structure, we need to start defining manageable chunks of tasks that a project team can completely understand and they can finish. So once again, this work breakdown structure, it's going to let us start thinking about what are all of the steps that need to go into making a house, whether it's the internal, the foundation, the external, and then how do I take it and break it into segments so that we can get all of these things accomplished and so that I can track them over time. Okay, so the process of building a WBS starts with clustering tasks around a logical grouping. These groupings can be things like related activities, where it's the design, the programming, the testing, or it can be around related geographies. I can do work breakdown structures based around geographic areas, a north region, a south region, east or west, or I can even look at functional. If I'm looking at a project of going through and helping an organization, I may look at accounting or HR, operations, and so forth. So work breakdown structures, the first one is to start clustering our tasks around a logical grouping so that we can make sure that we're capturing all of these tasks. Next, we need to go in and determine if our work breakdown structure is beginning to get enough detail. One way you can tell if a work breakdown structure has enough detail is to use what they call the rule of 80, which states that if the tasks need to be set up or broken down to where they have 80 hours or fewer, and that it has a tangible deliverable. An example of that may be if we state that we need to, one of the tasks is to frame the house. If framing the house means that it's going to take more than 80 hours, let's break that framing down. Let's say we're going to frame the downstairs and then we're going to frame the upstairs, or that we're going to do the walls and then we're going to do the roof. So you get the idea about the rule of 80 and how it can be used. Another thing when we're looking at the amount of detail that a work breakdown structure should have is that some industries determine the size of the tasks much differently than others. If we're looking at the programming of software and the amount of time that you will allow for each task probably is much less than if we're doing something like a large scale industrial building area. The next one is that those very complex projects means that we need to have all of the steps associated with each task and what kind of coordination has to be done with others inside of a work breakdown structure. So, with all of that said, we still have often overlooked tasks. And these tasks project managers often overlook are around different areas. One, it is the support tasks. What are those things that need to be done to support what we're doing? Such as, is there a test environment or converting of a database or something like that that needs to go into our project? Or it can also be those project management tasks themselves, such as the tracking, the analyzing the data, and coordinating with others. Often overlooked, even though it's used in every one of our projects. And finally, what are those administrative tasks? Is there anything that we have to do at the end? Is there any printing that has to be done, setting up of meetings, things like that? All of these are really important tasks, and in our recipe of building our product here, if we can't list each and every one of them and then track them, there's a chance that we're going to miss them over time. Therefore, we need to be able to track those things. Another thing we have to track is what we refer to as task dependencies. And these task dependencies is the concept that we have several of our steps or our tasks that are related to each other. Again, these are referred to as dependencies. Examples. The most common is where we have one step, step 1, that has to be completed before step 2. In this type, the very first task is called the predecessor, and the second task is the successor. The idea is that before you can do a phone interview, the successor task, you need to apply for the job, the predecessor task. Again, very common approach, something that we often see. The two tasks are related. This is the most common, where you have a predecessor and then a successor. However, there are other times that the two tasks must be done at the exact same time. The inspection for electrical and the inspection for water, if they have to be done together, that's a task dependency. Must be done simultaneously. However, there are other times when we don't have any dependency at all between the two tasks. Understanding these tasks and their dependencies will let you go through and schedule the timing when each and every one of these things needs to be accomplished in project management. Next, we need to be able to go in here and determine how long each one of our individual tasks will take. So, with the dependencies, we can determine order. Now we need to talk about how long will it take for each one of these tasks. This is a tough job. It's really difficult to go in and estimate the duration of things. However, there are some things that can help you. You can look at historical data, or you can go back and get estimates from others that have done the job before. You can go look at your resources, determine what the resources are and how much of the resources that you have, the capabilities of the other resources that you might have. And then finally, the last one, which is a fairly elaborate way of looking at it, is run a simulation and see how long you think it's going to take to finish the task. The bottom line here is, though, that there is often a misinterpretation about time when working on projects. And that comes from a misinterpretation of effort versus duration. Effort's the total number of hours that are estimated to be completed for the task. An example is that to complete the foundation of a house, it may take 100 hours of effort. Okay, it may take 100 total hours of effort. However, duration says the foundation really can't take 100 hours from start to finish to complete it. So what I have to do is I need to potentially increase the number of workers that I have, because the duration of of completing the task is, it may really only take me 4.5 days to complete the foundation, but that's going to require me to have more workers. Again, Effort is the total number of hours. Think about that as billable hours. And duration is the total number of time that will elapse while we're doing the project. Okay, again, time is just one of those resources that project managers have to look at. There are other resources that we also need to be looking at as well. These are both human and non-human resources. I think the human resources is easy to understand. It's hard to complete the building of a house with enough of the people of the right skills. However, we also have non-human resources to do this. It may be specialized equipment. It may be a crane that needs to be ordered so that we can put the beam on top of the house. If the non-human resources are not managed correctly, we oftentimes use our human resources inefficiently because the non-human resources weren't planned along the way. That means that if we're going to finish things on time and on budget and the right quality, we need to have each and every one of these things considered in our work breakdown structure ahead of time so that we can follow up the recipe exactly as it was meant to be so that we come out with a project that we want on time, on budget, and at the right quality. Finally, we'll just hit the task types. There are different task types that we need to think about as we move forward, and most of these tasks can be determined by the amount of work that is done. However, there are also fixed work tasks. Again, how much effort has to be done. Fixed duration tasks, which often is it's going to last 8 hours regardless of who shows up. An example of that would be a kickoff meeting. And then finally, fixed units. And those fixed units are those support tasks that we're doing along the way. With all of that said, we now understand the work breakdown structure. We know where that's headed. We have a common language of the discipline. You have seen a lot of the language that needs to come into it. And now it's time for us to start thinking about a software that we can use, like Microsoft Project, that will be able to help us go through and manage a project.